Trans people have officially destroyed Doctor Who. Our plan to take over all of pop culture continues. Up next, Jurassic Park. Alright, to be fair, the dinosaurs were always trans. That was kind of the whole point of Life Finds a Way. But regardless, hello interwebs, and I am here to review the first of the Doctor Who 2023 specials with David Tennant returning as the Doctor and Catherine Tate returning as Donna Noble. This episode titled The Star Beast. And as per usual, I will stay spoiler-free up front and then get into spoilers, but oh boy, do I have such big, explosive feelings about this episode for many reasons, and if you've seen the episode, you probably know why. Like, let me just say, the outraged merchants who were always yelling about, like, Doctor Who's gone SJW under Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker, were really thinking that Russell T Davies of all people, was gonna save them from wokeness. This episode will be a huge disappointment to them. In fact, I need to see something really quick. Yeah, I just literally looked up right now. The outraged merchants are having a field day with Doctor Who has been destroyed by wokeness again, apparently. But regardless, we're not going to talk about them too much, but there is some stuff to discuss in that vein in a little bit about how much I really adored this episode. Let's start a little bit broader though. I knew going into this episode that I was always going to have a little bit of a nostalgia sheen put over it. You know, it's David Tennant and Donna Noble, my two favorite companions, the companions that like I grew up with. Like David Tennant was always my Doctor and my favorite Doctor. He was the one I had growing up, even though Christopher Eccleston, who I also love, was my very first Doctor, and Donna and the 10th were always my favorite sort of Doctor companion pairings. And then also having Russell T Davies coming back, and then also, in my opinion, coming off of a very rough few years of Doctor Who. No shade at Jodie Whittaker or anything like that, but for me, Doctor Who just hasn't been hitting that bar. So this episode always was going to have that nostalgia sheen and bonus to it in my eyes, but also on the other hand, this episode just had to do so freaking much considering all the weight put on it. You know, there has been a disappointment in the fandom, you know, the past few years, just generally in terms of vibes. And then also just the fact that David Tennant's coming back, you're starting off with a new showrunner, it seems to be this big era with like Disney Plus coming in, they're starting off this Whoniverse thing, like there's a lot put on this episode. So, you know, there's such this like interesting mash of things going into this episode. And so I was sort of like worried about like, was it gonna buckle under the weight of nostalgia, buckle under the weight of all this pressure? And what I really loved most about this episode was it didn't feel like it had to carry any of that. It was just an episode that managed to be fun, tell a great Doctor Who adventure, and just have a really good time, and yet managed to bring in those emotional threads of nostalgia, and yet still feel like it was new and fresh to people who hadn't seen it. Like, I watched this episode with my partner, and she has she's seen Doctor Who, but she's never seen any of the stuff with Donna Noble, so all of this was sort of like fresh to her, and she still got like really into it and excited about it. So just on so many levels, this episode managed to succeed in just being a fun adventure, yet continuing these threads for old fans, and yet also feeling like a new good starting place for new fans, and reigniting this like passion for Doctor Who in a way that I haven't felt while watching it in a long time. And I think this episode, you know, just really hit that. And I think what was smart about this episode is it felt like it was a toned down adventure. You know, yes, it does get to the grandiose like world-ending stakes at certain points in the episode because Doctor Who always sort of goes for that, especially on the specials. But that being said, it didn't really feel like this was like galaxy hopping adventure running all over the place, wild things happening. It felt like it was a very like tailored down and smaller scale story that fit, you know, trying to reintroduce us to all these things, not going huge right off the bat, and let us focus in on the stuff with, you know, David Tennant and Catherine Tate back in the wheelhouse of this series, and really honing in on that drama. And I think that they did such a great job with it. Both actors, David Tennant and Catherine Tate, did such a wonderful job, and all the peripheral characters as well, like mostly Donna Noble's family, they all just did so wonderfully. And the other thing, and I'll talk more about this in the spoiler section, but the other thing that I really loved about this episode, like I joked at the top of this about like, you know, SJW outraged merchants getting upset about this episode, and they certainly will for obvious reasons, considering there is a trans character, Rose Tyler, in this episode, Donna Noble's daughter, as well as, you know, other things. But what I really loved about this representation here is, unlike the sort of Jodie Whittaker era, where it often felt very either tokenistic, like, hey, we'll not say this character's gay right before killing him off, or it felt like very in your face, like, look, this is the episode about how women are treated. This episode very much felt like it had a bunch of diverse characters from a bunch of different backgrounds and didn't necessarily over-highlight that fact, but still allowed them to be from their unique perspective when certain things relevant to who they were came up. Like, obviously we have the trans character with Rose Tyler, and there's certain moments with Donna Noble's family where, you know, like questions come up. It's like, oh, did I use the wrong pronoun? Like, but it never felt like it was like trying to beat you over the head with it in those moments. It felt like a natural thing. And it really comes down to, I think, Russell T Davies' writing about how he just knows how to really articulate how to include, and I'd say include, diverse people from different backgrounds in the story, not just tokenistically, but actually feel like our perspectives and who we are relevant to the conversation. And that continues into some of the disability representation in this episode. There has been a lot of controversy lately considering the representation of Davros in the Children in Need special that came out a few weeks ago with David Tennant, about there being this discussion about, like, you know, do we want to get rid of disability rep? Is this like a canon retcon? There's a whole like discourse about it, and I recommend my friend Vera Wild over on her channel Council of Geeks did a whole video going into all of that. But, you know, one of the big things came out of that was like, well, you're eliminating Davros being disabled, which is, you know, I understand, like, not wanting to show evil equating with disability, but, you know, then we lose some disability representation, and this episode brings in more disability representation. And again, the character is, like, the fact that she's in a wheelchair is never hyper-focused on, but there are moments where it becomes relevant, both in a way that just shows the difficulties that someone with a disability would face, but then also the unique, like, power and identity that can come from just, like, owning that's who you are in this as well, in a fun little sci-fi way. And so I really just, I thought Russell T Davies just did a great job of just, even in small moments, weaving these things together, and especially with the trans character, which we'll get to in a little bit, I thought was just so wonderful. But the rest of this episode was just a lot of fun. It felt great. It tied in the emotionality of these characters that I've been waiting for this payoff. You know, I never thought I would get more with Donna Noble and David Tennant, and the fact that we are, it feels like it's not just like coming back to the well just because, but feels relevant and feels emotionally weighty in such a really wonderful way. So I adore this episode, and it has me so excited for the next two specials of David Tennant. It has me very excited for Ncuti Gatwa coming in just a little while as well. So I'm just so pumped for Doctor Who, and this was just a really excellent way to start. But to talk about it more, let's get into spoilers. Okay, to talk spoilers here, I have to start with this. Holy crap, the literal end of the episode is the Doctor saving the day because they are non-binary, including the trans character coming in and being a part of that. It felt so, I gotta be frank with you, it felt so wonderful. And again, has me just trusting Russell T Davies more than I've ever trusted anyone with like a big franchise like this. Because, you know, I have made no bones about the fact that I've loved, like, you know, seeing more trans representation in Star Trek and other franchises, but even in those things, I've had a lot of criticisms in terms of, like, how they really include trans people in the narrative. But here, the fact that we get a trans daughter for Donna Noble, that, like, Donna is super accepting of, like, that fits Donna so much, that she would be like, no, we're not accepting bigotry or whatever. And we just get to see, like, little moments of, like, her, like, teaching with her mother about, like, how to handle, you know, like, pronouns and talking about her daughter in like, is it a sexist thing? Like, these are, like, fun little conversations that happen in families that I've seen in my own family when it came to me being trans, and I just love seeing that. But then even, like, subtle things like the villain of this episode, the Meep, literally calling her daughter weird and, like, showing, like, you know, the Meep's a bigot. Like, in little, like, subtle ways like that, like, weaving that in without drawing attention to it. Like, the Meep didn't go, like, I hate trans people, fuck non-binary people, they suck. But just, like, had that moment of, like, weird daughter to, like, highlight that. But then that identity being empowering in a way that, like, saves Donna Noble's life from being non-binary. And it not being like, oh, the fact that she is literally non-binary, because she's not, like, literally non-binary as a character. I believe she seems like a binary presenting trans woman. Maybe I'm wrong. She's not literally non-binary as, like, a trans identity, but she is sort of like a non-binary identity in sort of like inserting herself into this sort of like Donna Doctor triangle. And so I love this like discussion of like transness, non-binariness being both allegorical and literal in several different ways, and the Doctor being relating to that and like being like male, female, like the Doctor's non-binary, and making that like canon that the Doctor is non-binary. Like I really loved that idea and concept. It was so beautiful and wonderful, and just to have that be what saves Donna was, I adored that. I had to start there because that's the thing that I really needed to talk about, because I thought it was absolutely wonderful. And it should be stated that for Russell T Davies, Doctor Who, and David Tennant, and everyone involved in the show to do this, to stand up for trans people at this time and make trans people not just a tokenistic inclusion, but an actual, like, included part of the themes and narrative and story and texture of Doctor Who is just so meaningful when trans people are so vilified, especially in the UK. And I know David Tennant especially has been getting a lot of shit for continually vocally supporting trans people, like wearing trans pins and stuff, and it just has warmed my heart. I will defend this man until I die, because he has just been the absolute, just warmest, sweetest person, despite getting such vitriol for standing alongside trans people, and it means the world to me, and it makes perfect sense for Doctor Who. As David Tennant himself said, like, this is what Doctor Who is about, standing up for people. It's what science fiction is all about, like the best science fiction, in this joyous way. So I really think that this matters, and not just the fact that it matters because look, a trans person included, but it matters that it matters in the fact that being non-binary was part of the theme and texture of the show, and a trans person got to be part of that and say that. It just was so wonderful, especially because it came from a childhood hero of mine, David Tennant. You know, I've seen over the past years many of my heroes who I adored when I was children, especially certain women writers in the UK, perhaps, that failed me when we needed them most as a community. To have someone like David Tennant be there and just stand up alongside Russell T Davies and everybody here I can't express how much it means. And so all of that was great, but let's actually go through the episode a little bit. Like, for the episode started, I was a little bit like, David Tennant, like, lands and Donna Noble's right there. I thought that was a bit convenient. It felt a little bit rushed, in my opinion. It does just get, like, lampshaded a little bit later on and becomes, like, part of the story, which I did like. The fact that, you know, the TARDIS is, like, drawing him to her, and sort of, like, his face is back. So, like, it was brought up. It just felt, like, a little weird to just, like, pop us in there, because the last thing we saw was, you know, the regeneration, technically, unless you count the Children in Need special. It just felt a little rushed towards the top to get us into the action, and I understand that, and it does, again, get fixed later on, but it was just one of those, like, felt a little bit quick. But then once we get into this episode, and, you know, I know that the sole storyline with the Star Beast and the Meep is based on a comic book. I tried to stay spoiler-free for it, so, you know, I didn't know that the Meep was inherently a villainous character at first, but I kind of got the vibe and I like that you were able to figure it out. It's like, this doesn't really make sense. Like, why are there 3 groups of people firing at each other? Like, the Meep, there's these weird bug aliens, and then there's the soldiers, so that doesn't make sense. And so, like, the Doctor sort of figuring that out as you were figuring it out too, is like, oh, okay, I see how this is all fitting together. Like, I might have been a little bit ahead of the episode knowing, like, this doesn't make perfect sense, but it fits really well. I did love that. I also, just speaking of, since I'm holding this guy, I loved the new abilities of the sonic screwdriver, where he gets to, like, draw screens and stuff. Like, maybe some people have criticism of that being, like, a little less science fiction-y, where, like, in the sense that, like, oh, no, we just get a screen for this thing. But I kind of liked it, especially when he was able to, like, build the shields that he, like, shoves out and pushes out. I thought it was, like, a clever way to, like, do a cool action beat, and showing the Doctor using, you know, in the middle of an action beat, using the sonic screwdriver for a defensive purpose, I thought was really, really fun and clever. I did really kind of enjoy that quite a bit. So some people may say, like, oh, it makes it a little less like weird and made it more like plain science fiction. I can see that argument, but I'm here for it, especially since we got a lot of weird stuff with the Meep this episode too, with the Meep reveal, and I love the design of the Meep, like turning like evil, and like the teeth was just a lot of fun. But what really was the heart of this episode was the Donna-Doctor relationship, and the Doctor just really wanting to, like, stay away from Donna, but also feeling this draw towards her because he misses her. And I love the line where he says, like, I love her, you know, she's my best mate. Oh, am I saying things like that now? I thought was really sweet. And you just see this push and pull of him, like, wanting to stay away to protect her, but also, like, feeling drawn to her and caring about her and wanting to be near her because she was his best mate, especially with this face. Also, I really think that this speech works after the Jodie Whittaker era, because Jodie Whittaker's era was all about Jodie's doctor trying to form a family, trying to reach out, and yet still being distanced from them, still not really connecting, feeling like this, like, you know, I'm above you all, or I'm kind of distant, I'm pushed out a little bit. And so for the doctor to like have this face, to pull back into his friend that he's missed for so long, and to finally find a way to reconnect on a casual level, I think works really, really well for the arc of the doctor coming off of Jodie's era. So I like that there's a through line there that doesn't discount Jodie's doctor, but actually feels like she was just part of the whole thread, because it would have been very easy for, you know, people to look at, you know, the fan reaction to Chris Chibnall's era, say this sucks, and then to just dispose of it. But they didn't. It feels like it's a good through line in a very subtle way to this doctor, and I really did like that quite a bit. So that felt very natural. Really well handled, and the fact that Donna like gave away money to be like him was also sweet, and I love seeing her family, like Rose and Donna's husband, all fit in really well to the dynamic. I'm also really excited to see the late Bernard Cribbins come back, which will be really, really nice to see him one last time, especially now that he has passed away since the filming of presumably the next or third episode that we get in the series. So all of that was just, their dynamic was just so much fun, and especially Donna's mom just being like, oh my god, why are you here? Like, don't pay attention to him, daughter. Like, it was just wonderful. I adored all of that stuff. It was just so much fun to see. But the part that just had me grinning from ear to ear was at the end, where the doctor has to activate Donna, and him being like, no, you matter to me, like, you matter, like him just like being like, no, you are one person, you're ordinary, even as he says early in the episode, but you matter so much to me. And it felt like a great reversal, honestly, of David Tennant's regeneration. Like, he was behind that glass, he had to switch places in his finale when he regenerated, and now he has to kind of do the same for Donna to kill her. I thought was like a really good, like, subtle echoing of that regeneration, without being overt. And also the glass separating the Doctor and Donna being representative of not only their distance over the past few years because of what happened to Donna, but also tying into the themes of binary and identity and non-binary identity, about how we see men and women as separate instead of actually getting to coexist. So there was also a thematic and symbolic reference to the glass being between them as well, which I thought was incredibly smart on RTD's part. And then when Donna came back and said, my best 55 seconds of my life, and like just being like, I gave away all my money because I was trying to be like you, like just like full, like Catherine Tate going full out there, and I adored that. I think my only knock at that was, you know, when she thought she was going to die. I thought that was just so much fun, and really joyous. So like, and like saying Donna descending, you know, I loved as well, like just descending on the city, just that empowering moment, I thought was brilliant. And then we ended the episode with Donna sort of going into the TARDIS. And by the way, the new TARDIS looks gorgeous. I love him running around it and just finding joy in that, very much echoing, you know, this is meant to be like a 60th anniversary TARDIS, and it very clearly echoes all the old TARDIS's interior, you know what I mean. And so that was really wonderful. But then her saying, like, you could come back, you could be ordinary, you could have tea, you can come visit. And the Doctor's like, kind of listening, and you can tell that he's agreeing, but he's not fully willing to, like, yes, I can be ordinary. Like, it was just, their dynamic is so great, and it's so wonderful to see them both on screen again together, bouncing off of each other. I did love it. I also love the part where, like, Donna's husband's like, yeah, I'm bothered with you going off with a man, but not him. Like, I trust him. You two are mates. It's fine. I did love that. I thought that was great. So I just, on every level, this episode, I think, succeeded in everything it wanted to do. You know, the story wasn't anything super big to write home about in terms of the meat, but like, it's a small little reversal, you know, it's a little alien thing that wants to take over the world or whatever. Like, that's nothing spectacular, but it made it a little bit interesting by the meat in terms of, like, its design and the sort of subversion there with it being a cute thing. So there was, like, a little bit of fun there, but it wasn't anything to write home about, but I think that was important to be able to really hone in on this Dr.-Donna relationship and everything else that this episode had to do. So I think it was very smart, and I hope maybe the next two specials with David Tennant can get a little bit more complicated, a little more timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly. We'll see. Maybe, maybe not. But I think for this episode, I think that was a very smart decision, and I had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, the fact that, you know, literally the Doctor saves the day on the power of being non-binary, I thought was really wonderful, and this was a phenomenal return to form for Doctor Who. Again, no shade at Jodie Whittaker, maybe a little bit of shade at Chris Chibnall. But you know, their heart was in the right place with the Chris Chibnall era. I'll at least give that. But, you know, after that era of Doctor Who, to come into this, I think, was truly wonderful. So screw the outraged merchants who are going to whine and scream about all of this. You know, they whine and scream about Jodie, they whine and scream about this, but for me, there is a great difference in the ways that, you know, diverse characters are included in this episode versus, you know, how they're much more tokenized. And so I loved, like, all of that. I thought that was great. So this was a great episode of Doctor Who. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know. And tell me how we trans people have slowly been ruining pop culture, as is our plan, down in the comments. But beyond all of that, I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper.